Good afternoon, boys and girls. Welcome back to Social Studies 10 with Mr. Bannister. Yes, we are going to be today talking about First Nations people of the Northwest. Alright, what you need to understand about the Northwest is it's a huge area that did not have much law in the area. So what ends up happening is you have many different whiskey traders coming from the United States and trying to trade with the First Nations people. Now what you have to understand is the HBC controlled all trade in the Northwest Territories. However, many of these U.S. companies were sneaking up and trying to take advantage of the lacks in policing. All right, the central fort in this situation is Fort Whoop-Up. Liquor trade turned to widespread alcoholism, resulting in malnutrition, disease, and even death. In 1872, the government decided the Northwest needed some kind of policing. It feared the presence of whiskey traders would lead to the loss of some, if not all, of the territory. So the government established the world-famous Northwest Mounted Police. All right, the Northwest Mounted Police was a police force and paramilitary organization. Its task was to drive out the whiskey traders and regain control of the Northwest Territory. Spring of 1874, a group of Assiniboine people were attacked by a party of whiskey traders at Cypress Hills in southern Saskatchewan. The Cypress Hills massacre took the lives of about 30 Assiniboine and caused outrage in eastern Canada. The Northwest Mounted Police sent 300 officers into the prairies to establish control. By the time they reached Fort Whoop-Up, the whiskey traders had fled back to the United States, and the Northwest Mounted Police were originally welcomed to the region by natives they believed might bring an end to lawlessness. As we know, the Northwest Mounted Police was used by the Canadian government at times to actually persecute the First Nations people. All right. After the creation of Northwest Territories, Manitoba, Canada turned the process or began to focus its thing on the prairies. They wanted to open up the area to Canadian European settlement. Before they did, they needed to settle the questions of Aboriginal title. In 1870, all the land except for the Selkirk settlement, which was Manitoba, was all Aboriginal held. In 1870, treaty talks started between the Aboriginals and the Canadian government. Negotiations went through the Department of Indian Affairs, and Indian Commissioner W. Simpson led the talks. Near the end of August 1871, that should say, Simpson had negotiated treaties 1 and 2, giving the traditional land of the Cree and the Saltua to the Canadian government. Simpson had been told to only offer 168 acres of land to each family of 5. The Aboriginal people wanted to control 60% of the land that made up Manitoba. The Aboriginal people realized that no other offer would be made, so they negotiated for the government to include farm equipment, supplies, and instruction on farming techniques, which is kind of interesting. As we'll see later on, they were granted all that, but the government never fulfilled it. The next 6 years would have this repeated over and over, allowing the government to take control of the land and covering the prairies. The lands given to the natives were tiny in comparison to the land they originally held. They would later discover the government had no intention of living up to its side of the bargain. If you look in your textbook to figure 511, you will see what's going on. All right, as you can see on this map here's treaties 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the years that they were created, and also the years that some of them were amended. As you can see, coming all the way through from pre-Confederation through to here, and across the prairies, the treaties were signed. And then if you notice over here, pre-Confederation Vancouver Island treaties, there's 14 of them. However, those were the only treaties signed in British Columbia prior to 1999. All right, Aboriginal people welcomed the prospect of farming, but later realized the promise of tools, supplies, and animals would not amount to anything. The standard of living declined rapidly for most of the Aboriginals. The government justified its lack of action by blaming the Aboriginal peoples. It was said that it was unnatural for the natives to use farm equipment. Yes, unnatural for any human beings to use farm equipment, I know. The government did not want the natives to prosper as farmers. They did not want the natives selling surplus goods for cash. They wanted to control the native lives as much as they could. They also did not want the First Nations people to be in direct competition with any of the European settlers, as that would upset the status quo. By the end of the 19th century, almost all half of natives had abandoned the idea of farming and become fully dependent on the government for survival. That is still a huge issue in Canada today, where many of the First Nations people have never been able to get out of the hole that had been dug and never been able to get out of the shadow that was cast by the Canadian government, and it is still causing issues today. 1876, the government introduced the Indian Act, which confirmed that the natives were required to live on reserves and required that native children attend residential schools. The Indian Act essentially mentioned who would be Aboriginal, who would not. The government believed that treaty process had gone well. Most natives had now realized that they lost their primary food source of bison. The idea of a small amount of farm land was better than the idea of starving to death. The government used Catholic missionaries as translators, and they encouraged the natives to sign the treaties. The missionaries wanted the natives to become productive members of the new society on the plains. In other words, they wanted to assimilate them, make them non-Aboriginal. No consideration was given to the amount of cultural destruction, and the Northwest Mounted Police escorted the natives to their reservations as they were signed. Thank you very much, and I will see you in class tomorrow with all the other information that you'll need.